The New South Wales Parliament will next week again debate government legislation aimed at cracking down on graffiti vandals or artists, depending on your point of view. If passed, the bill will require juvenile graffiti vandals to appear before court for a graffiti offence. The courts will be given the power to suspend an offender's driver's licence. Last month, Labor, the Greens and the Shooters combined in the Legislative Council to vote against the changes. But the government is pressing ahead and the bill will be back in the upper house next Tuesday. Filmmakers Jake Lloyd-Jones and Merrin Callier have just produced a film entitled Unrequited Art, where they spent time with the artists and their staunch opponents as they sprayed their way around Sydney. Here's an edited extract.
Because it's just instant.
There are people in cities who find graffiti completely intolerable.
Street art, gives artists a chance to express themselves to a much greater kind of audience, I guess.
And there are other people who think that every little tag that they see popping up on walls like a flower blooming.
It's another form of expression.
And it's a matter of sort of trying to figure out, well, how do we resolve those kinds of differences?
I don't like every piece of artwork that's hanging in the Art Gallery of New South Wales, but I have a choice to go and see it if I want to. I have a choice to move on and not see it if I don't want to, but on the street, you don't. It's in your face whether you like it or not.
We actually genuinely believe that the arts and culture makes a healthy and interesting city. We recognise as well that there has been a bit of a loss of that gritty and grunge, and that's actually something that's sad that we're missing in the city now, and that's a reason why people would want to be here and they'd want to be part of a creative culture.
There's a whole lot of two-facedness about, I guess, all councils inherently talking about street art and graffiti. They always like to talk about street art. You can't say graffiti, but you can say street art.
And different councils have different approaches, like Marrickville Council has recently taken a bit of an aggressive approach, especially with putting up posters. Despite they've got a Greens majority, they've got a Labor mayor, and he put down one of his priorities in the Inner West Courier as like graffiti removal. That's what he believes the residents care most about, which really surprises me in such a progressive place like Marrickville.
Of course, some residents are not happy with the negative side of the graffiti, which we are, and we are responding very quickly, and we do understand their concerns.
Zero tolerance, I guess zero tolerance as far as means removing all graffiti quickly. I think it just actually encourages faster graffiti and maybe just makes it move around and just makes people do more, quicker, trashier artwork. It makes people adopt stickers and other kinds of culture more.
I think the zero tolerance approach and the rapid response approach is the single most effective way of controlling graffiti, because they're taking a risk to put their tags up in the first place. They're going out at night time, they're risking fines, they're risking community service, they're risking even jail time in extreme cases. So if they put it up one night and within 24 or 72 hours it's down again, what's the problem? Well, what we've found, because we run that sort of a program, is that they tend to move outside of our area because they're not getting the rewards that they're seeking. They're moving into adjacent councils that aren't running a rapid response program because we're cleaning it off too quickly.
So we have all these little localised successes, but the graffiti just sprouts in different places. So it's this sort of cat and mouse thing where the overall level of graffiti in our cities hasn't really changed over the last 30 years. It's just moved around and it's changed in its forms.
People are talking about outrageous criminal fines in Australia and even adding additional things like offensiveness or sedition or all sorts of things. Sydney Opera House, the amount of legal fines those guys got into over that, just seems insane. So I don't know whether that zero tolerance works. And as far as making people into criminals, developing a class of criminal culture, I think it's a really, really negative thing to be punishing people so extremely. I think it actually just makes them more hardcore, more committed people who want to be criminals, and it means that you get older guys encouraging young people to break the law, climb on train yards, things like that. So I think encouraging the criminality and increasing it is just really negative and destructive.
When we turn up to somebody's house, and often they're in tears, because they've spent thousands of dollars, renovating their home, and the next morning they turn up and someone's just scrawled across the entire side of their house, and they're like, we just can't keep up, we can't do it. And some of them are elderly, some of them are disabled. They can't climb up a ladder and paint their wall out every single week when it happens. So we get a lot of satisfaction turning up to somebody's home. It looks terrible when we turn up, but when we leave, it looks great.
I do find it really offensive when it would be a concrete tunnel and it would get painted over every week. It would probably cost about a couple of $1,000s to paint this tunnel, and kids would draw on it in chalk and they would paint over it every week. So they could have washed it off with water and a bucket. That's money just being wasted. Some of these people and paint companies are actually just sucking money out of the community.
We're spending so much money on a failed policy at the moment that ought to be better spent in other areas.
I guess there is some graffiti artists do make an effort to be careful. They don't want to hit people's private property and things. And I still think there's so many filthy, rancid alleyways that are just full of bins and rubbish. Why do people bother cleaning those places when they're already inherently revolting?
It annoys people, and they have no control over it because you can't catch them. When you do catch them, you can't prosecute them. They get a slap on the wrist, they're let back out again, and we've actually had cases where these kids have been caught, the police have slapped them on the wrist, they've been let out, and the same night they've gone and written "screw the police" on the side of the building because they got caught. And there's no deterrence in the law at the moment in Australia, so they're getting away with it. We liken them to cockroaches. The moment the light turns on, they scatter. And they're very clever about how they do it. I mean, we've actually watched them from a distance, and they'll have a spotter out on each side of the street, and then they'll be watching for cars or for the police or for pedestrians, and then they'll have someone doing the tag, and then they'll all scurry off up the street again. There's
graffiti grandparents in Sydney, and I've gone to some events, and I've been the average age. I'm 38. There's people older than me, 50 people, my age and older, still doing graffiti, or their kids have grown up and left home and they're getting back into it.
There's no typical socio-economic group that they come from. We do work in Wallara Council where they come from a fairly high socio-economic group. They're fairly wealthy families, kids from private schools. And then you go all the way out to suburbs, Blacktown and Penrith, where they're probably from a lower economic group, and they're still doing it as well. So it's more a subculture. It doesn't really have any boundaries in terms of wealth or status.
I'm not a big fan of tags. I think 99% of them are pretty bad and probably done by teenage kids. But I do think that there are some people who do amazing tags. I think in some places they can look incredible, like a big yellow wall just covered in hundreds of tags. I actually kind of think that can look interesting.
Obviously, some of it is frustration. We know that teenagers can get bored. We also recognise that teenagers tend to have a relatively shaky sense of identity and where they are in the world, and that tagging is a way of locating yourself, of literally stating your name and stating your place.
In our minds, we can differentiate between these great big colourful pieces and these tags. In the minds of the people that are doing it, they don't. They think this and this are the same. So when they see this, they think, oh, that's a good idea. I'll go and start putting my stuff up as well. And so you get this carry-on effect. So if you go, all right, well, this is acceptable, then you have to say, yeah, this is acceptable as well. There's no difference in their mind between the two of them.
You know, tagging is part of the way you develop your skills with an aerosol can. Tagging is part of the way that you learn to navigate the city as a graffiti writer and find opportunities for getting up and where you're going to be most effective.
I heard some people say that, oh, that's where all street artists start, and I actually think, well, actually, a lot of people I know did stencils and other kinds of street art first and then did tags as a way of getting themselves into mainstream graffiti culture. And I see 12-year-olds tagging around here all the time in daylight, on the backs of signs and things, and they're not really interested in it being art.
I don't particularly like tags and the labels on art. I really like the idea of coming across an art piece and it's just that. It's just a piece of art. And, you know, I don't particularly want to know who it is. And, I mean, it would be nice to meet up with them and collaborate, but, yeah, it's just, I think it's wonderful.
It's anonymous and it's thankless. And
You don't have to wait for opening night or anything like that. You just put it up and people can see it already. And it's not the normal gallery crowd, it's people that just walking down the street and not expecting it. I like that a lot. It's not wanky, it's not people drinking wine and eating cheese and talking about you like you don't exist.
Why does it have to be on the side of someone's building? Why does it have to be illegal? Why can't it be treated like any other artist? And if they want to be considered serious artists, then, you know, there are rules and everyone has to play by those rules.